Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now if you've been following me for a little while, you might know that I lived out of a backpack for 5 years and I've lived in this van for 3 years. During the time of living out of my backpack I was sleeping in cars and in hostels, but mostly hostels. So having travelled full time since 2014, I feel like I'm well equipped to talk about the pros and cons of backpacking versus van life. So if you want to travel full time but you're not sure how, then this is the video for you. Keep watching, there'll be no faffing around, and without further ado, let's start with the pros of van life. So pros of living in a van, obviously there are a lot of them. I mean, all you need to do is go onto social media and see a van parked in a beautiful location with mountains out the sliding door view or hot air balloons or whatever it is. So you know how good it can be. So I'm not going to spend too long talking about the pros, but I'm just going to go through the main ones that come to mind. The first one being probably the reason why most people move into a van, which is freedom to be wherever you want. And also coming into the very first point, a lot of people move into a van is because it's cheap, long-term, very cost effective. So if you're wanting to do this for a few years and you buy a van and you know you're going to be like 3 years, 5 years, you know, long term, you will save money because it is cheaper than renting or living or buying a house, for example. So that is definitely a first point, but that comes with freedom to go wherever you want and travel wherever you want, which is obviously my top thing. Another thing that I really like about van life that I'm going to miss when we backpack again is being able to have a clean space and know that, because sometimes when you're going to go into a hostel you can read reviews but you'll never really know whether there's going to be bed bugs or dust or dirt or whatever else you sometimes find in hostels. So the fact that you've got your space, you can clean the sheets, you can control the space and the kitchen cleanliness, I really like that about living in a van. Another thing is having all your kitchen amenities, being able to cook, especially since we're vegans. If we're in a non-vegan friendly country, it was really handy for us somewhere like Albania, where it's very difficult to find vegan food out and about. Another thing is the opportunity to connect with other van lifers. So that's probably the best thing the last few years of living in this van, going to the van life festivals, meeting people just on the road and meeting people from Instagram. We've had a really nice time doing that, and actually some of our best memories living in a van have been hanging out with other van lifers. So that's definitely a plus point. Another thing, being able to work remotely from anywhere. So if you have got a remote job, you can build, if you're building your own van, you can build in a little office space that's going to be comfortable enough for you to use. So that's something to take into consideration. You don't have to go out and find like a working space or rent an office space or find like a Starbucks with a desk or something. You know that you've got that all in your van, which will save money as well. Another thing, it's very convenient having everything you need in here. You can have your bed, your toilet. You know, if you just want to have a bit of downtime for a few days and not travel, just park up somewhere, then you can, if you build an off-grid van like we have, you can just chill for a few days, which is a really nice thing. So let's move on to the cons of van life, and there are quite a few of these, so I'm going to try and mainly keep it in list format so I don't take too much of your time, but I'll elaborate on a couple of the points. So the number one con of van life being the initial expense in buying a van. So this van that we've got right now costs $4,900. We bought it in, well, like 3 years ago. I'm not very good at remembering years, but it had 42,000 miles, which is a really good price. I think that's more difficult to find these days. We did the whole conversion for £3,000. Obviously since then we've upgraded loads of the electrical stuff, so it's worth a lot more than that now, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to live in it, but it is a bigger upfront cost than backpacking, for example, which is pretty much no upfront cost. So that's something to think about. Another thing is maintenance and repair costs, which obviously do add up. We've broken down a couple of times, once in France, once in Albania. Each time it was about €1,000 to get the van fixed. And in Albania they didn't fix it. We just paid €1,000, well, it was 1,500 actually, and they didn't fix it. We had to fix it ourselves. Anyway, that's definitely something to think about, but taking into consideration the cost of renting or buying a house, I think it's still cheaper to live in a van, even with the repair costs, as long as you don't have too many. Next con is limited shower and bathroom facilities. Now, even if you have a shower in your van, which we don't have a proper shower in our van, then you've still got to find water for that, which can be really tricky. You've also got to have enough power to heat up that water if you're doing van life in winter, but we have like a little pump shower, and at the moment it's impossible to use it because it's so cold outside, and with cold water it's painful, very painful, and even if we boiled a kettle, by the time the water hits your skin, the icy air has frozen it, so it's just not feasible in the winter time. But we do have a toilet, which I really like about our van, because it means we can just be parked up in the wilderness or in the town or cities, and it doesn't matter, we can still use the toilet. We've got a compost toilet, which is my recommendation, because we had a chemical toilet for the first year, and I can tell you the compost toilet is much nicer to empty. The next one is difficult to find camping spots. This obviously depends on the country, and I feel like the easiest countries for van life that we've been to is Spain, Greece and Turkey. We could pretty much park anywhere, on the beach, in the forest, in towns, and there are pretty much no restrictions. But in the UK, where we are right now, there's loads of restrictions. Height barriers, no camping signs, lots of signs that say don't park here between, or you can only park here between 8 AM and 10 PM. So they obviously to stop camper vans parking there. So that's kind of annoying and something to think about. The next one is limited privacy and security. Our van has got a lot of privacy actually, because we don't have any windows in the back, but that means we do have the door open quite a lot to let the light in, and to get a bit of airflow. So that's kind of annoying. But security wise, I mean, if someone wants to break in, they're going to break in, but you can do everything to deter people, like deadlock, steering wheel lock, etc. Another thing that you need to think about is limited comfort. If you've never done anything like this before, it won't be as comfortable as a house, but I personally don't mind it at all. But obviously you're going to have a smaller bed, maybe not as thick of a mattress, probably not a full-size sofa to lounge on and stuff like that. Another con of van life is if you enjoy visiting cities, it's kind of tricky to park in a city. What I love about backpacking is that you can go to somewhere like, for example, I don't know, Venice, and wake up in Venice and explore the streets at night. But if you live in a van, you've kind of got to park up outside the city and take public transport in. And then you've got to take into consideration when, like, the last train might be at 6 PM or 7 PM, and then, you know, it limits you a little bit. So that's something to think about. But we typically park in campsites outside of the city, just so the van feels a bit safer when we're out and about. Another con of van life is the stigma. People tend to, not everyone, but a lot of people tend to think that van life is dirty. They litter, they leave their poo everywhere, but that's obviously not true. In fact, from what I've seen, it's the van lifers who are picking up the litter and making the spots nicer. And obviously every van lifer has a bin, and most have a toilet in their vans, so there's no excuse really. Another thing is, and I think the very last con of van life is, if something happens to your van, then that's your home and you potentially have nowhere to sleep, which kind of comes into your van breaking down part of it. Come for a walk with me while I talk a little bit about the pros and cons of backpacking. So backpacking, I mean, I absolutely love it, and I could talk all day about the pros of backpacking, but I'm not going to talk all day about it because I don't want to bore you. So I'm just going to say the top ones that came to mind when I was thinking about this. The first one being the opposite of the van life one, which is it's very low cost to start up. The biggest cost that you're going to have starting up backpacking is buying that initial flight, and then if you go somewhere like Southeast Asia, yes, the flight over there is expensive, but when you've got there you can get trains and buses. Like night trains are such a good idea, because firstly you can sleep whilst you're travelling, which is amazing, because with van life you have to actually physically drive and get very tired. So yeah, but not only that, but if you're sleeping on a train, you save money on accommodation. So there are so many ways to save money with backpacking. I actually really love night trains and stuff like that. So another one is you can cover a lot of ground really quickly without having to drive yourself. I guess that comes into the first point. The opportunity to meet new people and experience different cultures. Now I know you can experience different cultures in the van with whatever you're doing, but the places that I'm really interested in aren't the kind of places I can just drive to. So I love the culture of places in Southeast Asia. It's just so interesting to me. And I love places that are completely different to where I'm from. And I think that's why I'm kind of edging towards backpacking again at the moment, because Europe is slightly too similar for the UK for my liking. Another one is that it encourages physical fitness. I know I'm on a walk right now, but I feel like when you're backpacking, you're just constantly carrying around a backpack, constantly on foot. I feel like van life has made me a bit more lazy, and I love that about backpacking. It really forces you to get out and do stuff. So it's all about the adventure and exploration. Now there are a couple of types of backpacking and a couple of ways to do it. You can be moving every couple of days, but you can get burnt out pretty quickly, or you can go and rent like an apartment for a couple of months here and there in different locations. Especially if you're working online, that's really handy to give yourself a bit of time off of planning all the time and traveling all the time. I just want to quickly mention that over the last few years I've learned, since doing Instagram, that in the US you guys have kind of got a different meaning of the word backpacking than we have in the UK. So for us it's like you get your backpack on, you go abroad and stay in hostels and stuff like that, whereas in the US I think when you say backpacking, it's more related to putting your backpack on and hiking and sleeping in a tent and hiking. So when I'm talking about backpacking, I'm talking about like staying in hostels, just using public transport, having your backpack, walking around, that kind of backpacking. Anyway, I love it. There are loads of pros to it. You have to try it at some point in your life, and I think the biggest pro of backpacking is putting yourself out there in situations you would never usually be in, and you can't hide away from those situations. Especially if you're staying in hostels, you'll end up meeting loads of people. And I just want to say that if you're a solo person on your own and you really want to travel, you will never be alone when you're backpacking. If you stay in hostels, there'll always be people wanting to hang out. You'll automatically put yourself out there more because you need to, and you'll actually really love it. And now let's move on to the cons of backpacking. Let's just get straight into the list. I don't faff around here, do we? So limited space and amenities. Obviously you have very limited space in a backpack. And the smaller you can get your backpack, the better, because I've made that mistake and I've carried around like an 80-litre backpack completely filled to the brim for, I think I carried that around for 3.5 years before I downsized my backpack, and I think I ruined my back actually doing that. So have as minimal stuff as you can, but it is very difficult, especially if like you have hobbies. Like for example, I love to carry my guitar around, but backpacking, that is very difficult. I also love crocheting and making things, but I can't do that when I'm backpacking because I've got no space to store it, which is I'll just add that in as a pro about the van and a con about backpacking, because you just can't have that much stuff. And if your hobbies are arts and painting and knitting and stuff like that, then that's challenging. Another thing is security. So if you are traveling with like a laptop and a nice camera and stuff like that, you want to keep it on your person at all times pretty much, and your wallet and your passport and all the things, because I don't really trust anywhere or putting my bag anywhere, to be honest. I'm really careful of that, which can be a bit stressful sometimes. Another con of backpacking is the difficulty of finding somewhere to work. So if you work online, you need like a good quiet working space sometimes, and you can't always get that. You'll probably need a private room in a hostel or something, but staying in like a hostel with loads of other people in your room can be pretty difficult. Another thing is the planning it takes. Obviously you need to find somewhere to sleep every night. In the van you do have to do that, but if worst comes to worst, you can just park on a lay-by on the side of the road and sleep and hope that no one moves you on, or just say, oh, I'm really sorry, I was just having a rest because I was too tired to drive. But you can't skip a day of planning when you're backpacking. You really have to find somewhere to sleep that night. Next, limited comfort and cleanliness levels, potential crowded dorms, shared bathroom, noisy surroundings. You can't control the cleanliness of your hostel room or the kitchen that you're getting food from. So if you're kind of a clean, nice, neat and tidy person like I am, that can be challenging, but not the end of the world. But reviews aren't, you can't always trust a review on a hostel, trust me. So to summarise all that, if you are looking to make the choice between van life and backpacking, you just know you want to travel full time but to know the best way to do it, I would say van life is for if you don't want to get rid of all your comforts and don't want to go like a too different lifestyle to what you already have at home, because it is kind of like having home but you just get to move around, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's kind of easier because you've got your facilities here, you've got more space for your stuff, so I think it's kind of an easy starting off point. And on the other hand, if you're just wanting to throw yourself into something completely adventurous and social and completely different to your everyday life, then just go for backpacking, because it's obviously cheaper, startup costs, etc. I think the best of both worlds, which maybe is what I would like to get to the point of having, is having the van in like your home country or whatever country you want to base yourself in, and then going on backpacking trips from there. At the moment, the reason I thought of making this video is because we're kind of deciding whether we want to sell the van or keep the van, sell it and just go backpacking long term for the next few years, or keep the van and go like in storage or something and go on shorter trips. So if you're following along on Instagram, then you'll know what's happening in my life. I put stories up, and if you're not, I'll leave my link for that in the description of this video so you can see what I get up to on a daily basis. But yeah, that's it. I hope that this is given you a bit of insight to backpacking and van life and the pros and cons. I know I didn't compare them directly because they are just so incredibly different lifestyles, and they both come with their own little quirks and challenges. But if you've got any questions about anything, just let me know in the comments. And if you did like this video, feel free to check out my other ones or just subscribe for the next ones, and I'll see you in the next one.